moment I laid eyes on Marcus Volov's face, I should have spun around. Even now, 6 months later, I can still vividly recall his expression as that helicopter descended onto the landing pad at Permafrost Penitentiary. A mix of relief and something disturbingly akin to terror. But I didn't turn back. The promotion had me hooked, and I was too eager to prove my worth as the youngest warden in Alaska's correctional system. The pay increase was a welcome bonus, especially with Sarah pregnant and medical bills mounting back in Anchorage. Before I could even protest, Volov rushed out to meet me as the helicopter blades whirred, his coat whipping in the downdraft. He snatched my duffel bag and practically dragged me toward the concrete fortress that would be my home for the next 14 days of hell. "David Chun," he yelled over the rotor noise. "Thank God you're here. We need to talk before the weather turns." I followed him across the windswept tarmac, catching my first glimpse of Permafrost Penitentiary. The facility squatted against the white expanse of the Alaskan tundra like some Soviet-era bunker, a mass of concrete and steel with narrow windows. No trees, no roads, just frozen wilderness stretching to the horizon in every direction. The nearest town was 200 miles south, merely a truck stop and a gas station. Inside, the warmth slammed into me like a wall. Volov led me through a series of increasingly elaborate security checkpoints, card readers, metal detectors, biometric scanners. The guards nodded respectfully as we passed, but I noticed their eyes kept darting toward the interior corridors. "Impressive security," I said, attempting conversation. Volov's laugh sounded too sharp. "Security, right? That's what we call it." His office, my office now, was sparsely furnished. Standard government-issue desk, filing cabinets, a wall of security monitors displaying empty corridors and cell blocks. My attention was immediately drawn to the thick manual sitting on the desk, stamped with red letters. Classified. Warden eyes only. "Your Bible," Volov said, patting the manual. "Read it tonight. Memorize it. Follow every word exactly, no matter how strange it seems." I flipped it open to the first page. The title read, Permafrost Penitentiary, Operational Protocols and Containment Procedures. Containment procedures? That seemed an odd choice of words for a prison manual. "Marcus, what exactly am I walking into here?" The briefing in Anchorage was pretty vague about the inmates. Volov was already putting on his coat. "The helicopter's waiting. Weather window closes in 10 minutes. He paused at the door, his hand trembling slightly on the handle. "David, this isn't a normal prison. The inmates, they're not normal criminals. Whatever you think you know about corrections, forget it. Just follow the rules, and maybe you'll survive until spring." Before I could ask what he meant by survive, he was gone, leaving me alone with that unsettling manual and a growing feeling that I'd made a terrible mistake. I spent the rest of the afternoon meeting the key staff. Deputy Warden Lisa Santos seemed reasonably competent, a 15-year veteran with graying hair and sharp eyes. Chief Guard Miguel Torres was built like a linebacker and had the handshake to match. Dr. Emily Harrison, the facility psychiatrist, struck me as nervous, constantly adjusting her glasses and glancing at the security cameras. "How long have you worked here?" as I asked Dr. Harrison during our brief meeting. 6 months, she replied. I replaced Dr. Kellerman after his departure. Retirement, medical leave, stress-related. That evening, I finally opened the manual. The first section seemed normal enough. Standard prison operations, guard rotations, meal schedules. But then I reached the special protocol section and my blood ran cold. Permafrost Penitentiary, Special Containment Protocols. Rule 1. Never enter the cell blocks during feeding time, 3:33 a.m. to 4:44 a.m. If emergency access is required, notify the chaplain immediately. Rule 2. All cell doors must remain sealed with blessed salt lines. Replace salt daily during morning inspections. If salt lines are broken or disturbed, evacuate the affected block immediately. Rule 3. If internal temperature drops below -40 degrees Fahrenheit, initiate Emergency Protocol 7. Do not attempt to investigate temperature anomalies alone. Rule 4. The chaplain's quarters must remain occupied at all times. If the chaplain is absent for more than 24 hours, Contact the emergency line immediately. Rule 5. Communication with inmate 001 is permitted only through mirrors or reflective surfaces. Never make direct eye contact. Rule 6. If you hear singing in an unknown language, evacuate level B immediately. Do not attempt to identify the source. Rule 7. The generators must never shut down completely. Backup power is insufficient for maintaining containment. Generator failure constitutes a facility-wide emergency. I read the list 3 times, convinced it had to be some kind of elaborate hazing ritual for new wardens. Blessed salt? Mirror communication? Emergency protocols for singing? It sounded like something out of a horror movie, not a federal corrections manual. But as I continued reading, the tone remained deadly serious. Detailed procedures, contact numbers, references to previous incidents. If this was a joke, someone had put considerable effort into it. My first official day started at 6 a.m. with a facility inspection. Santos walked me through each block, explaining the daily routines with professional efficiency. Everything seemed normal enough. Concrete corridors, steel doors, the familiar institutional smell of disinfectant and processed food. But the inmates bothered me. In 20 years of corrections work, I'd never seen prisoners so still. They stood in their cells without moving, staring at the walls with unblinking eyes. No pacing, no conversation, no typical prison noise, just silence and unsettling motionlessness. They're always like this? And I asked Santos as we passed Block C. Every day. Makes the job easier, I suppose. What are they in for? Her expression tightened. Check the files. Everything's documented. But when I tried to review the inmate files that afternoon, I found them heavily redacted. No photographs, no real names, just numbers and case references. The charges were listed as multiple casualties, unexplained deaths, or simply a classified incident. Birth dates were blacked out, erased from existence on those forms. Previous addresses suffered the same fate, rendered unreadable. Even the arresting agencies were redacted, their identities concealed. Inmate 001's file was the most peculiar of all. Transferred from some undisclosed location 2 years prior, devoid of any trial record, absent any sentencing documentation, just a solitary note scrawled in red ink. Extreme caution required. Follow mirror protocols at all times. That evening, I called Sarah from my apartment situated above the administrative offices. The sound of her voice was a welcome lifeline. A connection to the normal world I seemed to be leaving behind. How's the new job, honey? Different? I responded, watching the swirling snow dance past my window pane. Very different. Are you okay? You sound tired. Just adjusting. How's the baby? Kicking up a storm. The doctor says everything looks perfect. We talked for another 20 minutes about nursery colors and potential baby names. Mundane concerns that felt impossibly precious after a day surrounded by those silent, staring inmates. After hanging up, I tried to shake off the growing unease that had settled within me, telling myself I was simply adjusting to a new environment, a new reality. The third morning at Permafrost Penitentiary brought my first genuine indication that something was profoundly wrong. During the routine inspection, I discovered the salt lines outside cell block D had been disturbed. Not broken exactly, but swirled into strange, almost deliberate patterns, as if something had been moving, or perhaps slithering, through them. Torres? I called out to the chief guard. What happened here? He studied the salt patterns, his brow furrowing in concern. I'll have maintenance replace them immediately, sir. That's not what I asked. What caused this? Torres glanced around nervously before lowering his voice to a near whisper. Sometimes the salt moves. No one knows why. We just replace it and follow protocol. Salt doesn't move by itself, Miguel. No, sir, it doesn't. That afternoon, I was engrossed in reviewing budget reports when the temperature alarm blared. The digital readout on my wall displayed a chilling -42 degrees Fahrenheit in Block B, far below the threshold for Emergency Protocol 7. I grabbed the manual, located the procedure, and initiated a full lockdown of the affected area. Within minutes, maintenance reported that the heating system was functioning normally. The temperature reading returned to normal just as quickly as it had plummeted. When I pressed for an explanation, the technician merely shrugged, a gesture of helplessness. Happens sometimes, Warden. Old building, weird drafts. But I'd worked in old buildings before. Drafts didn't cause 20 degrees temperature swings in sealed corridors. The fourth day started quietly enough. I spent the morning in meetings with department heads, reviewing staffing schedules and supply requests, normal warden duties that helped me feel grounded, anchored to familiar routine. Deputy Lisa Santos mentioned that Father McKinnon seemed distracted lately, missing some of his regular rounds. Should I speak with him? I asked. Might be a good idea. The inmates get restless when routines change. But when I went to find Father McKinnon after lunch, his quarters were empty. Not just empty, but radiating a sense of abandonment, as if no one had occupied them for days. I found him eventually in the chapel, kneeling before the altar with his back to me. Father McKinnon. He turned, and I was immediately struck by his altered appearance. Deep circles shadowed his eyes, his cheeks were hollow, and his hands trembled visibly as he blessed himself. He looked like a man who hadn't slept soundly in weeks. Warden Chun, forgive me? I didn't hear you come in. Are you feeling all right? Deputy Lisa Santos mentioned you've been missing some rounds. His laugh was strained, almost bitter. Missing rounds? Yes, I suppose I have been. He stood slowly, his joints protesting with a chorus of creaks. Tell me, Warden, have you read the manual? Really read it? Of course. And the rules make sense to you? I hesitated, a flicker of doubt crossing my mind. I'm still adjusting to the facility's unique procedures. Unique? He nodded slowly, knowingly. That's one word for it. He moved closer, and I caught the unmistakable scent of whiskey on his breath. Those aren't prisoners in those cells, David, and this isn't a prison. Before I could formulate a response, he pushed past me and walked out of the chapel, leaving me alone with the flickering altar candles and a growing sense of dread, a nameless fear that I couldn't quite define. That night, I discovered scratch marks on my office door, for parallel gouges etched into the steel, each about 2 inches long, too deep and precise to have been made by any tool I could readily identify. I tried to convince myself they must have been there previously, that I simply hadn't noticed them in my initial hectic days. Buildings accumulate damage over time. There had to be a reasonable explanation. But as I sat in my office reviewing the day's reports by the dim lamplight, I couldn't help but glance repeatedly at those marks. They looked fresh, disturbingly so. They looked deliberate, and they looked like claw marks. I was preparing for bed when I suddenly remembered Father McKinnon's cryptic warning about the manual. Acting on impulse, I returned to my office and retrieved the classified section once more, reading with renewed scrutiny this time. Buried deep within the appendices, I uncovered references to previous incidents. Containment breach in 2019, partial manifestation in block level C, emergency evacuation during winter storm. The final entry was dated just 3 months prior. Chaplain replacement required due to psychological breakdown. Recommend enhanced screening for religious personnel. Dr. Kellerman's replacement, Father McKinnon's predecessor. I was about to close the manual when I noticed something that sent a shiver of ice down my spine, freezing my hands in place. Tucked between the last pages was a folded piece of paper, a handwritten note penned in shaky script. David, if you're reading this, then Marcus Volov managed to get out and they sent you to replace me. The manual doesn't tell you everything. The things in those cells aren't human, and the rules are the only thing keeping them contained. Whatever you do, don't let them know you can see what they really are. The chaplain knows more than he admits. Trust Lisa Santos, but watch Miguel Torres carefully. The generators are everything. If the power fails, thank God help us all. Marcus, P.S. check Mac Kinnon's quarters tonight. He's been keeping a journal. I sat staring at the note for a long time, the words burning into my mind, listening to the wind howl relentlessly across the desolate tundra outside my window. Every rational part of my mind insisted this was elaborate nonsense. Some kind of psychological chaplain knows more than he admits. Trust Lisa Santos, but watch Miguel Torres carefully. The generators are everything. If the power fails, Thank God help us all. Marcus. P.S. Check McKinnon's quarters tonight. He's been keeping a journal. I sat staring at the note for a long time, the words burning into my mind, listening to the wind howl relentlessly across the desolate tundra outside my window. Every rational part of my mind insisted this was elaborate nonsense, some kind of psychological game being played by staff who resented a new warden. But the scratch marks on my door told a different story. The temperature anomalies told a different story. The unnatural stillness of the inmates told a different story. Against my better judgment, I found myself walking through the darkened corridors toward Father McKinnon's quarters, Volov's note clutched in my sweating palm. The facility felt different at night, more oppressive, as if the walls themselves were watching. Emergency lighting cast long shadows that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. McKinnon's door was unlocked. Inside, I found his personal journal lying open on the bedside table, as if he'd been expecting someone to find it. The final entry was dated that morning. Day 127. They're getting stronger. The salt lines broke again last night, and I heard singing from level B around 3 a.m. The warden replacement arrived soon. God forgive me, but I hope he's stronger than I am. The things below are waking up, and I don't think the old containment methods will hold much longer. If something happens to me, someone needs to know the truth about what we're really guarding here. I closed the journal and looked around the room more carefully. Religious icons covered every wall. Crosses, saints, protective symbols from half a dozen faiths. Salt lines traced the doorway and windows. And there, carved into the wooden nightstand, were more of those 4 parallel scratches. As I turned to leave, I heard it. Faint but unmistakable. Singing, a low, melodic sound in a language I didn't recognize, drifting up from somewhere deep in the facility. According to the manual, I should evacuate level B immediately. But I was already there, standing in the chaplain's quarters on level A, listening to something that shouldn't exist sing to itself in the darkness below. I locked the door behind me and walked quickly back to my office, Volov's warning echoing in my mind. Just follow the rules, and maybe you'll survive until spring. For the first time since arriving at Permafrost Penitentiary, I was beginning to understand that survival might be more than just a figure of speech. I started keeping a log of the things that didn't make sense, thinking I could find a pattern in the madness that was slowly consuming Permafrost Penitentiary. Day 5 began with monthly inventory, a mundane task that felt like a lifeline to normalcy. I spent the morning in the supply warehouse with Deputy Santos, counting medical supplies and checking expiration dates on emergency rations. The familiar rhythm of administrative work helped steady my nerves after the previous night's discoveries. Everything looks good, Warden, Santos said, marking items off her clipboard. Though we're running low on salt for the lines. We go through about 50 pounds a week, sometimes more when there are disturbances. I watched her face carefully. Lisa, how long have you worked here? 15 years. She didn't look up from her clipboard. And in 15 years, you've never questioned the salt protocols? Her pen stopped moving. I've learned not to question things that keep us alive, David. That afternoon, I reviewed staff performance evaluations in my office, trying to focus on personnel management instead of the scratch marks on my door that seemed deeper every time I looked. Chief Guard Torres knocked and entered, his usual confident demeanor replaced by visible tension. Sir, we have another issue with the salt lines. I followed him to Block C, where the blessed salt had been disturbed again, but this time was different. Not just swirled, but carved into deliberate symbols, angular marks that hurt to look at directly, as if they were designed to confuse the human eye. How often does this happen? I asked, kneeling beside the blackened salt. More frequently since winter set in, maybe twice a week now. And you just replace it. Following protocol, sir. Father McKinnon blessed the new salt this morning. The mention of the chaplain made my stomach tighten. I hadn't seen him since our disturbing conversation in the chapel 2 days ago, and his absence felt increasingly ominous. Day 6 brought the first temperature anomaly I witnessed directly. I was reviewing budget reports when the air in my office suddenly turned frigid. My breath began to fog, and frost formed on the windows. The digital thermometer plummeted from 68 degrees Fahrenheit to minus 42 degrees Fahrenheit in under 30 seconds. Following Emergency Protocol 7, I initiated lockdown of the affected areas. The temperature snapped back to normal as quickly as it had dropped, leaving no trace except my racing heart and the maintenance chief's bewildered report that all heating systems were functioning perfectly. During afternoon rounds, I witnessed something that shattered my remaining skepticism about the facility's true nature. Standing outside cell 47, I watched through the food slot as the inmate inside pressed against the steel door. For a moment, his arm seemed to phase through the metal bars. Not completely, but enough that I could see flesh and steel occupying the same space. I blinked hard, certain my eyes were playing tricks. When I looked again, the inmate was standing motionless in the center of his cell as always, but the temperature in the corridor had dropped 20 degrees, and my breath came out in visible puffs. "Did you see that?" I asked the guard beside me. "See what, sir?" But his eyes told a different story. He'd seen it too. That evening brought blessed relief in the form of the guard's weekly poker game. Torres had invited me to join them in the break room, an unusual breach of hierarchy that I welcomed desperately. We played 5-card stud with Patterson, Kowalski, and Matthews, sharing stories about life outside Alaska and complaining about the cafeteria food. "Ever think about transferring?" I asked during the fourth hand. The table went quiet. The guards exchanged glances that spoke of shared secrets. "Transfer where?" Torres finally asked. "This is specialized work, sir. The clearance requirements alone. What makes it chaplain knows more than he admits. Trust Lisa Santos, but watch Miguel Torres carefully. The generators are everything. If the power fails, thank God help us all. Marcus, PS check Mac Kinnon's quarters tonight. He's been keeping a journal." I sat staring at the note for a long time, the words searing into my mind, listening to the relentless howl of the wind across the desolate Alaskan tundra outside my window. Every rational fiber of my being insisted this was elaborate nonsense, some kind of twisted psychological game being played by staff harboring resentment toward a new warden. Yet, the scratch marks marring my door whispered a different narrative. The inexplicable temperature anomalies painted a different picture. The unnatural stillness that had settled over the inmates hinted at a different reality. Against my better judgment, and with Volov's note clutched in my sweating palm, I found myself navigating the darkened corridors toward Father McKinnon's quarters. The facility possessed a different aura at night, more oppressive, as if the very walls were sentient, observing my every move. Emergency lighting cast elongated shadows that seemed to subtly shift when my gaze drifted elsewhere. McKinnon's door was unlocked, an invitation in itself. Inside, I discovered his personal journal lying open on the bedside table, as if he anticipated someone discovering it. The final entry was dated that very morning. Day 127. They're getting stronger. The salt lines were breached again last night, and I distinctly heard singing emanating from level B around 3 a.m. The warden replacement is slated to arrive soon. God forgive me, but I desperately hope he possesses a strength I lack. The things lurking below are awakening, and I fear the antiquated containment methods will soon prove insufficient. Should something befall me, someone must know the truth about what we are truly guarding here. Closing the journal, I scrutinized the room with renewed intensity. Religious icons adorned every wall. Crosses, saints, protective symbols culled from a multitude of faiths. Salt lines meticulously traced the doorway and windows, and there, etched into the wooden nightstand, were more of those telltale for parallel scratches. As I pivoted to leave, I heard it, faint yet unmistakable, singing, a low, melodic hum in a tongue utterly foreign to me, drifting up from the depths of the facility. According to the manual, immediate evacuation of Level B was paramount. But I was already there, standing in the chaplain's quarters on Level A, privy to a sound that defied explanation, singing to itself in the darkness below. I secured the door behind me and hastened back to my office, Volov's chilling warning echoing in my thoughts. Just follow the rules, and maybe you'll survive until spring. For the first time since my arrival at Permafrost Penitentiary, I began to comprehend that survival might encompass more than mere figurative language. I initiated a log, meticulously recording the inexplicable events, hoping to discern a pattern within the encroaching madness that was gradually consuming Permafrost Penitentiary. Day 5 commenced with the monthly inventory, a seemingly mundane task that offered a fragile lifeline to normalcy. I spent the morning in the supply warehouse alongside Deputy Santos, meticulously counting medical supplies and verifying expiration dates on emergency rations. The familiar cadence of administrative work served to steady my frayed nerves after the previous night's unsettling discoveries. Everything appears to be in order, Warden, Santos confirmed, marking items off on her clipboard. However, we're experiencing a shortage of salt for the lines. We expend approximately 50 pounds weekly, sometimes exceeding that during periods of heightened disturbances. I scrutinized her expression intently. Lisa, how long have you been employed here? 15 years. Her gaze remained fixed on her clipboard. And in 15 years, you've never questioned the salt protocols? Her pen faltered. I've learned to refrain from questioning the measures that safeguard our lives, David. That afternoon, I immersed myself in reviewing staff performance evaluations within my office, striving to concentrate on personnel management rather than the scratch marks on my door, which seemed to deepen with each passing glance. Chief Guard Torres knocked before entering, his typically confident demeanor replaced by palpable tension. Sir, we're encountering another issue with the salt lines. I trailed him to Block C, where the blessed salt had once again been disturbed, but this time, the disturbance was distinct, not merely swirled, but deliberately carved into symbols, angular markings that induced discomfort upon direct observation, as if intentionally designed to confound the human eye. How frequently does this occur? I inquired, kneeling beside the blackened salt. With increasing frequency since the onset of winter, perhaps twice weekly now. And you simply replace it? Adhering to protocol, sir. Father McKinnon blessed the replacement salt this morning. The mention of the chaplain sent a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. I hadn't seen him since our unsettling exchange in the chapel 2 days prior, and his absence felt increasingly ominous. Day 6 ushered in the first temperature anomaly I personally witnessed. I was immersed in reviewing budget reports when the air within my office abruptly turned frigid. My breath materialized into visible fog, and frost began to form on the windows. The digital thermometer plummeted from 68 degrees Fahrenheit to minus 42 degrees Fahrenheit in under 30 seconds. Adhering to Operational Protocol 7, I initiated lockdown of the affected areas. The temperature rebounded to normal with the same abruptness with which it had dropped, leaving behind no residual effects save for my racing heart and the maintenance chief's bewildered report that all heating systems were functioning flawlessly. During afternoon rounds, I witnessed an event that irrevocably shattered my remaining skepticism regarding the facility's true nature. Standing adjacent to cell 47, I observed through the food slot as the inmate within pressed against the steel door. For a fleeting moment, his arm appeared to phase through the metal bars. Not entirely, but sufficiently to allow me to perceive flesh and steel coexisting within the same space. I blinked rapidly, convinced my eyes were deceiving me. Upon looking again, the inmate stood motionless at the center of his cell, as always, but the temperature in the corridor had plummeted by 20 degrees, and my breath emerged in visible puffs. "Did you witness that?" I asked the guard positioned beside me. "Witness what, sir?" But his eyes betrayed a different truth. He had witnessed it too. That evening brought a welcome respite in the form of the guard's weekly poker game. Torres had extended an invitation for me to join them in the break room, an atypical breach of hierarchy that I welcomed with open arms. We engaged in a game of 5-card stud with Patterson, Kowalski, and Matthews, exchanging anecdotes about life beyond Alaska and lamenting the quality of the cafeteria food. "Ever contemplate transferring?" I inquired during the fourth hand. An unsettling silence descended upon the table. The guards exchanged knowing glances that hinted at shared secrets. "Transfer where?" Torres finally responded. "This is specialized work, sir. The clearance requirements alone." "What makes it so specialized?" Another uncomfortable silence hung in the air. Matthews folded his hand and pushed himself up from the table. Getting late. Early shift tomorrow. The game dissolved quickly, leaving me alone, wrestling with questions that seemed to have no answers forthcoming. Day 7 dawned with Father McKinnon absent from morning chapel. His failure to appear for scheduled rounds triggered emergency protocols I hadn't even known existed. Radio checks, systematic searches, accountability reports filed with classifications I couldn't decipher. We located his quarters around noon, and the scene stopped me dead in my tracks. The room resembled a battlefield. Furniture overturned, religious icons ripped violently from the walls, books scattered across the floor with pages torn out, deep gouges scarring the wooden nightstand and the concrete walls. Parallel marks too precise to be random damage, far too deep to have been made by human hands. But it was the symbols burned into every surface that chilled me to the bone. The same angular marks we'd been finding etched in the salt lines, carved with surgical precision into wood and stone. "Jesus," Deputy Santos whispered behind me. "He's not here," I stated, the obvious hanging heavy in the air. No blood, no signs of struggle beyond the initial destruction. It's as if he simply vanished. We searched the facility level by level, calling McKinnon's name into the echoing corridors that swallowed our voices without a trace. Santos took the upper floors while I descended toward the maintenance areas, following protocols for missing personnel that felt woefully inadequate for whatever had transpired here. As I searched the lower levels, I began to hear whispers in the walls, familiar voices calling my name from empty rooms. Sarah's voice, soft and full of love. A child's voice that squeezed my heart because we hadn't even chosen names yet. "David," the whispers called. "Help us, David." Santos found me standing in a maintenance corridor, staring blankly at a ventilation grate. "You hear them too," she said. It wasn't a question. "Hear what?" "The voices. They use people you love. It's how they try to get you to break protocol and come to them." "Who is they, Lisa?" She met my eyes directly for the first time since I'd arrived. "The things we're paid to keep contained, David. The things that used to be people before they became something else." Father McKinnon remained missing as night descended. We filed reports, initiated extended search protocols, and tried to maintain normal operations while staff members jumped at shadows and checked locks with obsessive regularity. Day 8 ushered in the singing. I was in my office at 3:30 a.m., unable to find sleep, staring at security monitors that showed motionless figures standing in their cells like bizarre, macabre statues. At exactly 3:33 a.m., the sound began, low and melodic, in a language that predated human speech, rising from the depths of Level B like an ancient lament. According to Rule 6, I should evacuate Level B immediately. The emergency alarm activated automatically, bathing the corridors in red light as staff evacuated the lower levels. I initiated Emergency Protocol 7, following procedures I'd memorized but never truly expected to have to use. As lockdown barriers descended throughout the facility, I realized I was no longer running a prison. I was operating a containment site. The singing continued for over an hour, sometimes harmonizing from multiple sources, other times reducing to a single voice that sounded ancient and hungry. When it finally stopped, the silence felt even more oppressive than the sound had been. As the all-clear sounded and lockdown procedures lifted, I returned to my office to find something that made my hands tremble uncontrollably. The locked drawer in Vulov's desk had somehow sprung open, revealing files that definitely hadn't been there before. The first document was stamped with classifications I didn't recognize. Permafrost Penitentiary, Supernatural Containment Operations. Eyes only. With trembling hands, I began reading the truth about what I'd been hired to guard. The inmates weren't criminals at all. They were demons, supernatural entities captured by a classified government program operating since the 1950s. The facility had been built on an ancient Inuit burial ground where tribal shamans had once imprisoned malevolent spirits using rituals passed down through generations. Modern technology had replaced the old ways. Electromagnetic fields instead of ritual circles, blessed salt instead of sacred stones, psychiatric medication instead of spiritual cleansing. But the fundamental purpose remained unchanged. Containment of things that should not exist. Each file contained photographs that my rational mind struggled to process. Images of the inmates in their true forms. Twisted amalgamations of shadow and flesh, creatures with too many teeth and eyes that reflected light like an animal's. The final document was a memo dated 3 months ago. Subject: Containment degradation at Facility 7. Recent incidents suggest electromagnetic barriers losing effectiveness. Salt line disruptions occurring daily. Staff psychological evaluations indicate exposure-related mental deterioration. If primary containment fails, initiate permafrost protocol. Facility destruction preferred to entity release. I sat in my office as the blizzard raged outside, staring at evidence of horrors beyond human comprehension. The generators were struggling to keep up. The backup systems were woefully inadequate. And somewhere in the depths of the facility, 17 demons that had been masquerading as human prisoners were growing stronger by the minute. Father McKinnon was gone, vanished without a trace. The containment was failing, unraveling before my eyes. And I was beginning to understand that survival until spring might require more than just following the rules. The real nightmare was only just beginning, creeping from the shadows. The truth revealed itself in fragments, like pieces of a nightmare slowly assembling into something too horrible to comprehend. Day 9 began with me barricaded in my office, poring over Vulov's classified files with the desperate intensity of a man trying to solve his own death sentence. The documents painted a picture that violated everything I thought I knew about reality. But the evidence was undeniable, staring me right in the face. Each inmate file contained surveillance footage from their processing, grainy black and white videos that showed normal-looking people being escorted into the facility. But when I played the same footage through the specialized monitoring equipment Vulov had hidden in his desk, the images distorted and writhed, revealing the truth that lay beneath the human facades. The thing in cell 001 appeared on screen as a writhing mass of shadow and teeth, its form constantly shifting between dimensions, a glimpse into the abyss. The 1962 footage displayed its capture by men clad in military uniforms, their expressions weighed down by the gravity of their confinement. Inmate 014 had been apprehended in Nome after the unsettling disappearance of 17 children over a single winter month. The surveillance recordings revealed a creature seemingly sculpted from ice and insatiable hunger, its fingers unnaturally elongated into claws, its eyes reflecting no light whatsoever. I dedicated countless hours to scrutinizing each file, meticulously cross-referencing incident reports with local disappearances, striving to maintain a semblance of standard administrative procedure while my comprehension of the world crumbled around me. The routine morning inspection felt surreal, traversing past cells that contained ancient horrors while feigning to count inventory and verify maintenance logs. Dr. Harrison discovered me in the records room that afternoon, amidst a scattering of documents and discarded coffee cups. "Warden, you missed the staff meeting." I looked up at her, truly seeing her for the first time. The nervous fidgeting, the constant glances at security cameras, the way she avoided direct eye contact with the inmates. She was aware. They all were. "How long have you known what they truly are?" I inquired. Her face paled. "I don't know what you mean." "The inmates, Emily. The things in those cells. How long have you known they're not human?" She retreated toward the door, her hand trembling on the handle. "You need to stop reading those files, David. They're classified for a reason. Some knowledge is too dangerous." "Dangerous for whom? The demons or us?" The word lingered in the air between us like a confession. Dr. Harrison stared at me for a long moment, then quietly closed the door and sat down across from my desk. 3 months, she whispered. "I've known for 3 months. Ever since Dr. Kellerman's final session recordings were unsealed for my review." "What happened to Kellerman?" "He attempted to treat them, believed he could assist them, cure them, comprehend their psychology." She offered a bitter laugh. "Spent 2 years conducting therapy sessions with entities that thrived on human suffering. Ultimately, he lost the ability to distinguish reality from nightmare. They had to remove him under sedation." Day 10 brought the undeniable realization that our containment was failing catastrophically. During the morning rounds, Guard Patterson reported temperature fluctuations in Block D that defied technical explanation. cells oscillating between Arctic cold and suffocating heat, creating condensation patterns on the walls that resembled ancient script. The salt lines were being compromised faster than we could replace them. Miguel Torres had maintenance working overtime, but the blessed barriers lasted only hours before something unseen would carve new symbols through them. "Sir," Torres said, locating me in the security office that afternoon, "we need to talk." I followed him to a monitoring station where he displayed surveillance footage from the previous night. The timestamp indicated 2:47 a.m., and the image was grainy, but what I witnessed froze my blood. The corridor appeared deserted in normal light, but when Torres switched to infrared, shapes moved through the hallways, tall, angular forms that generated no heat signature but cast shadows on the walls. They moved with purpose, testing doors, examining salt lines, gathering information. "They're scouting," Torres said grimly. "Learning our routines, mapping our defenses. How long has this been happening? Weeks, maybe months. We've been watching them on night shift, documenting their behavior, but Marcus Vulov ordered us not to report it to administration." "Why not?" Torres met my eyes with an expression that blended resignation with terror. "Because reporting it would mean admitting that containment has already failed. And once that's in the official record, they initiate permafrost protocol, the facility destruction, with us still inside." That evening, I attempted to call Sarah, desperate to hear her voice, to recall what normal life felt like. But the storm was intensifying, and the satellite uplink was failing. I caught fragments of her words. The baby was due in 6 weeks. She missed me, something about the nursery being finished, then static and silence that felt like abandonment. Day 11 shattered what remained of my trust in anyone around me. I was reviewing the night shift reports when Deputy Lisa Santos entered my office. Something was amiss with her appearance. Her movements too fluid, her smile too wide, eyes that didn't quite focus on the same point. "Morning, David. How are you adjusting to the facility?" She'd never called me by my first name before. In the 2 weeks I'd known her, it had always been Warden or Sir. "Fine," I said carefully, watching her face. "Any issues overnight?" "Nothing unusual. Just the normal sounds from Level B, the singing, the scratching, you know how it is. But there hadn't been any incidents on Level B according to the logs. And Lisa Santos had been the one to explain that the voices used names of people you loved to lure you into breaking protocol. I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out a small mirror, angling it to catch her reflection. In the glass, her face appeared distorted, features shifting like smoke, eyes that were too dark and too deep. "Lisa," I said slowly, "when did you start working here?" 15 years, she replied, but her voice had changed, becoming layered, as if multiple people were speaking in harmony. "I've been waiting for you, David. We all have." I bolted from my chair and ran for the door, but she moved faster than any human could, blocking my path with inhuman speed. Her appearance dropped completely, revealing something tall and angular with skin like charred wood and teeth that reflected the fluorescent lights. "You can't run from us forever," it said in Santos's voice. "We know where your wife lives. We know about the baby." I grabbed the emergency alarm and activated facility lockdown, sealing blast doors throughout the complex. The thing wearing Santos's face hissed and withdrew as emergency lighting bathed the corridors in red. Over the intercom, I heard chaos erupting throughout the facility. Screams, inhuman sounds, the crash of breaking glass and splintering wood. The demons weren't just busting out of their cells. They'd been walking among us for weeks, maybe even months, wearing the faces of people I trusted implicitly. I discovered Guard Kowalski in the armory, his hands shaking so violently he almost dropped the weapons he was loading. Unlike the others I'd seen, his reflection in the polished metal was perfectly normal, showing no telltale distortion. "Thank God," he breathed when he saw me. "I honestly thought I was the only one left who was still real." "How long have you known about this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Week and a half, maybe 2. Started noticing that some of the guards never seemed to eat, never took bathroom breaks, never looked tired, no matter how long their shifts were. Then I saw Miguel Torres talking to himself in 3 completely different voices. It was like a damn ventriloquist act gone wrong. He thrust a shotgun at me, loaded with shells distinctly marked with religious symbols. Salt rounds. Father McKinnon made them before he disappeared. God rest his soul. Where are the real staff members? Kowalski's face turned grim, a shadow passing over his features. I don't think there are any others left, sir. I think some of them have been gone for months. Replaced. Day 12 brought the absolute end of everything we knew. The generators finally surrendered their desperate struggle against the relentless storm at 4:17 a.m. I was holed up in my office, trying to desperately coordinate with the outside world through failing radio equipment, when the lights flickered violently and then died completely. Emergency power kicked in with a jolt, but the backup systems were woefully insufficient for full containment protocols. The temperature throughout the facility began plummeting immediately. Within minutes, my breath was visible in the air, and frost was beginning to form on the inside of the windows as the heating system gave up the ghost. But this wasn't just a mechanical failure. It was something far more sinister. This was supernatural cold, the kind that emanated from things that had never been alive, things that defied natural law. On the flickering security monitors, I watched the electromagnetic barriers fail one by one, each flicker a death knell. Cell doors that hadn't opened in decades began to swing wide with a groan of rusted metal. The blessed salt lines cracked and turned black as pitch, as if they were being burned from within by some unholy fire. And then I saw them, the unholy things. The inmates began shedding their human disguises like snakes molting their skin, revealing the horrors that lay beneath. Cell 001 erupted in a darkness so complete it spilled into the corridor like liquid shadow, choking the light. Cell 014 filled with impossible geometries that burned the eyes to look at directly, a violation of all Euclidean laws. Cell 023 simply ceased to exist in any rational sense, becoming a void that pulled at the very edges of reality, threatening to unravel the fabric of existence itself. The thing that had been masquerading as Lisa Santos appeared on the monitor, its true form finally revealed in the harsh glare of the emergency lighting. It moved through the corridors with a predatory grace that was both terrifying and mesmerizing, no longer even bothering to pretend to be human. I watched 17 demons break free from their containment, each one a grotesque violation of natural law, each one ravenously hungry after decades of agonizing imprisonment. The facility's automated systems began relentlessly initiating permafrost protocol, sealing blast doors with deafening crashes, activating emergency beacons that pulsed with desperate light, and preparing for controlled demolition, the final solution. But I was still trapped inside, barricaded in my office with failing equipment and creatures straight out of nightmare hunting through the corridors just outside. On the radio, I caught fragmented transmissions from the outside world, cold, detached voices confirming my worst fears. Containment breach confirmed. Initiate sterilization procedures immediately. No survivors expected. Through my office window, I could see lights in the distance. Military aircraft approaching rapidly through the raging storm. Help was coming, but they weren't coming to rescue anyone. They were coming to make absolutely sure nothing escaped the facility's walls. The scratching on my office door had become continuous now, an insistent, maddening sound, accompanied by voices that sounded like every person I'd ever loved calling my name, begging me to open the door. But I'd learned not to trust voices, no matter how familiar. I'd learned not to trust faces, no matter how innocent they seemed. I'd learned that some prisons aren't meant to rehabilitate. They're meant to contain things that should never have existed in the first place, horrors best left undisturbed. The real test of my survival was about to begin, and I was rapidly running out of time. I counted 37 demons on the security feeds before I finally stopped counting and started desperately running for my life. Day 13 began with me trapped in my office, watching hell break loose through the failing monitors, each flicker of the screen a reminder of my impending doom. The emergency power was rapidly dying, and with it, any hope of maintaining even basic surveillance of the facility. But what I saw in those final minutes of electronic oversight would forever haunt me, seared into my memory like a brand. The demons moved through the corridors with purposeful intelligence, no longer bothering to feign humanity. They communicated in that ancient, guttural language I'd heard during the horrifying singing, coordinating their hunt with chilling tactical precision. Some possessed abilities that defied the very laws of physics, phasing effortlessly through solid walls, manipulating temperature and light with unnatural ease, and moving with impossible speed through spaces far too small for their monstrous forms. The thing that had been Lisa Santos appeared on camera 7, its elongated limbs dragging something that might once have been Guard Patterson, now a broken, unrecognizable mess. When it looked directly at the camera, its eyes reflected the emergency lighting like a predator's, and the monitor screen cracked from the inside, a spiderweb of destruction spreading across the glass. A pounding on my office door, violent and insistent, made me grab the shotgun Kowalski had given me, my heart pounding in my chest. But instead of claws or inhuman voices, I heard human desperation, a plea that cut through the cacophony of chaos. "Warden, it's Kowalski. We have to move now or we're dead." I cautiously opened the door to find him bloodied but alive, clutching an emergency pack and a radio that crackled with distant military chatter, a lifeline in the storm of madness. "How long do we have?" I asked, my voice tight with fear. 20 minutes until airstrike authorization. The beacon's our only chance. If we can activate it and identify as survivors, they might extract us before they level this place to the ground. "Where's the beacon located?" His face went grim, and he hesitated before answering. "Level C, the deepest part of the facility, sir." Level C, the section I deliberately avoided investigating. The place where Father McKinnon's disembodied voice had seemed to call to me from the suffocating darkness. The place that wasn't supposed to exist on any official facility map. A ghost in the machine. We moved swiftly through maintenance corridors, following routes Kowalski knew intimately from 15 years of thankless night shifts. The facility had transformed into something straight out of a fever dream. Walls that inexplicably sweated impossible moisture, corridors where the geometry didn't quite work, and air that tasted sharply of copper and ozone, a metallic tang that stung the nostrils. Behind us, I could hear them hunting, their presence growing closer with each passing second, scraping sounds that seemed to emanate from the walls and ceiling simultaneously, and voices that chillingly mimicked people we'd known, calling our names with perfect emotional manipulation, preying on our deepest fears and regrets. The thing wearing Santos's face was particularly persistent, using her voice to beg for help, to apologize for what was happening, and to promise explanations if we just stop running and listen. A siren's song of deceit. We found desperately needed emergency supplies in a dusty maintenance closet, water, protein bars, and flashlights with batteries that miraculously still worked, despite the pervasive electromagnetic interference that plagued Lation, preying on our deepest fears and regrets. The thing wearing Lisa Santos's face was particularly persistent, using her voice to beg for help, to apologize for what was happening, and to promise explanations if we just stop running and listen. A siren's song of deceit. We found desperately needed emergency supplies in a dusty maintenance closet, water, protein bars, and flashlights with batteries that miraculously still worked, despite the pervasive electromagnetic interference that plagued the facility. For 5 minutes, huddled in that cramped space with the door barricaded, we tried to catch our breath and pretended, just for a moment, that survival was a real possibility. "My daughter graduates high school next month," Marcus Vilov whispered, his voice barely audible as he stared at a family photo he'd pulled from his wallet. 20 years I've worked this goddamn job to pay for her college. You'll see her graduate," I said, the words feeling flimsy and inadequate even to my own ears. "What about you, David? Your wife, the baby?" I thought about Sarah, probably sound asleep in our bed back in Anchorage, her hand resting protectively on her swollen belly, completely unaware that her husband was trapped in a living hell with creatures that somehow knew her name and face. "I have to survive. She's depending on me." It was the last semblance of normal conversation I would have for what felt like an eternity. The descent to Level C took us through realms that shouldn't have existed, defying all reason. The facility maps ended abruptly at Level B, yet here we were, following a seemingly endless flight of concrete stairs that plunged far deeper than the original Foundation blueprints allowed. The very texture of the walls morphed as we descended, transforming from sterile, institutional concrete to rough-hewn stone, looking disturbingly hand-carved, etched with symbols that made my eyes ache and water when I tried to focus on their alien forms. The temperature plummeted with each step we took. But this wasn't just mechanical cold. This was the bone-chilling cold of the deep earth, of places where sunlight had never penetrated, of spaces that existed outside the boundaries of normal reality. "Volov?" I whispered, my voice trembling slightly. "What exactly is down here?" "Things that make the others look almost human," he replied, echoing the chilling guideline I'd memorized weeks ago during my orientation. The facility was built on top of something older, David. Much, much older. Level C was a waking nightmare of claustrophobic, rough stone passages and vast, echoing chambers that felt impossibly ancient, predating human comprehension itself. The walls were covered in primitive artwork, crude, unsettling figures engaged in bizarre rituals, indecipherable symbols that seemed to writhe and shift when observed peripherally, grotesque depictions of things that should never have existed in the first place. But it was the cells that stopped me cold, freezing me in place. Unlike the sterile, modern containment units above, these were carved directly from the bedrock itself, sealed with thick iron bars that were marred with rust stains and disturbingly organic patterns that pulsed beneath the grime. Most were empty, their occupants presumably released when the power failed, unleashed into the darkness. But some still held things that made the demons upstairs seem almost benign, almost innocent. In one cell, something that might once have been human sat hunched in a corner, its limbs twisted into impossible, unnatural configurations, singing that wordless, mournful melody in a voice like the wind whistling through forgotten graves. In another, darkness itself seemed to have taken on a tangible substance, pressing against the bars with a palpable intelligence and malevolent purpose that sent shivers down my spine. And at the very end of the long, echoing corridor, in a cell larger and more imposing than all the others, something waited that I recognized with a sickening dread from the classified files. Inmate 001, the Wendigo-class entity, imprisoned here since 1962. It wore the crude shape of a tall man clad in a tattered, filthy prison uniform, but the proportions were all wrong, too gaunt, too unnaturally tall, with joints that bent and twisted in directions that human anatomy simply didn't allow. When it turned its head slowly to look at us, its face was a horrifying composite of every person who had ever gone missing in the vast, unforgiving Alaskan wilderness. A shifting mosaic of features that blended and blurred like a living, breathing photograph of despair. "David Chen," it said, its voice a chilling rasp like the sound of winter wind tearing through dead trees. "I've been waiting to meet the new warden." Following the operational protocols I drilled into my memory, I pulled out the small, rectangular mirror from my emergency pack and angled it carefully to see its reflection. In the glass, its true form was revealed in all its horrifying glory. A creature of pure bone and shadow and endless, insatiable hunger, with antlers that scraped against the low ceiling and eyes like frozen, distant stars. "The barriers are failing," it continued conversationally, as if we were just discussing the weather. "The old ways are ending and the new ways are insufficient. Soon we will be free to reclaim what was taken from us, to wander again." "What do you want?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, though I dreaded the answer with every fiber of my being. "I want to go home, David. I want to return to the forests and the snow, to the lonely, desolate places where humans venture alone and afraid. But first, I want to thank you for your service, Warden." It smiled, revealing teeth like jagged icicles, promising pain and death. "Your wife Sarah is sleeping peacefully in Anchorage. The baby is due in 6 weeks. A boy, though you don't know that yet. They're both so vulnerable, so utterly alone while you're away on your important work." The threat was unmistakable, hanging heavy in the air. I raised my shotgun, my hands shaking, but the creature just laughed, a sound that echoed through the stone corridors like a death knell. "Salt rounds in here? You're in my domain now, Warden. The old contracts that bind us weaken with every passing moment. Soon, nothing will contain us." Marcus Volov grabbed my arm, his grip tight and desperate. "The beacon, David. We have to activate the beacon." The emergency transmitter was located in a chamber even deeper than the cells, past symbols that made my head throb with a searing pain and through passages that seemed to shift and writhe when I wasn't looking directly at them, playing tricks on my eyes. The device itself was ancient military hardware, probably installed during the facility's original construction, a relic of a bygone era. As I activated the beacon and began transmitting our location and survivor status, I heard footsteps behind us. Multiple sets, moving with a coordinated, purposeful stride. They had found us, closing in. 17 demons filled the chamber entrance, led by the entity that had been masquerading as Deputy Lisa Santos. In the flickering, unreliable emergency lighting, their true forms were revealed in all their grotesque horror, nightmares given tangible substance, creatures that violated the laws of nature simply by existing. "David?" the Santos thing said in her familiar, once comforting voice, now twisted and corrupted. "You don't have to die here. Join us. Become something more than human. We can teach you to shed that limiting flesh, to become something eternal and powerful." Behind them, the Wendigo entity from Cell 001 ducked awkwardly through the entrance, its impossible height forcing it to bend nearly in half, its presence filling the room with an oppressive dread. "I told you I wanted to thank you for your service, Warden. You've been such an excellent host." It gestured languidly toward Marcus Volov, who screamed in agony as his body began to convulse and change, his flesh rippling like water as something else took control, tearing him apart from the inside out. In a matter of seconds, my last human ally had become another enemy, another living nightmare wearing a familiar face, his eyes now glowing with an unholy light. "Now," the Wendigo continued, its voice dripping with malice, "you have a choice to make, David. Submit to us willingly, and your wife and child will be spared. Resist, and they will become the first of many. We visit when we escape this prison." The Wendigo hissed, its words a chilling promise. My thoughts immediately went to Sarah, to the baby boy, David Jr., I would never hold if I perished here. I pictured the ordinary life we had meticulously planned, the future hanging precariously by a thread. Then, the weight of Marcus Volov's files crashed down on me, the 17 other facilities scattered across the globe, the hundreds of entities contained within their walls, the catastrophic fallout if even one of those places crumbled. My hand instinctively reached for the emergency detonator on the beacon console, the manual override for permafrost protocol, the ultimate failsafe when containment was irrevocably breached. "You're right," I stated, meeting the Wendigo's gaze. "I am grateful for my service, and this is how I serve." With a resolute push, I triggered the detonator. The facility shuddered violently as charges detonated throughout the structure, collapsing corridors and sealing off chambers. The demons unleashed a cacophony of shrieks, a blend of rage and terror, as tons of concrete and steel descended upon them, entombing them beneath the permafrost, their rightful domain. I sprinted through the collapsing passages, following the illuminated emergency exit routes as the entire complex imploded around me. Behind me, their screams echoed, laced with fury and vows of eventual retribution. I broke through to the surface just as the rescue helicopters materialized, emerging from an emergency hatch as the facility completed its meticulously planned self-destruction. To the military personnel who pulled me from the wreckage, I was the lone survivor of a tragic structural failure during a brutal winter storm. No other bodies were ever recovered. The official inquiry attributed the disaster to generator malfunction and structural weaknesses exacerbated by extreme weather conditions. The facility was deemed a total loss, the site sealed off and classified as an environmental hazard. 6 months later, I find myself working as a warden at a minimum security facility in Oregon, overseeing white-collar criminals and non-violent offenders. My sleep is plagued by disembodied voices chanting in ancient languages and unsettling shadows that flicker at the edge of my vision. Sarah gave birth to our son, David Jr., 8 weeks after my rescue. He's healthy, perfect in every way, and sometimes, when I hold him close, I can almost push aside the horrors I've witnessed. But late at night, when the temperature plummets without warning or when I hear scratching noises emanating from within the walls, the chilling reality returns, the knowledge of what remains out there, lurking in facilities just like permafrost. Just last week, I received an unmarked envelope in my office mail. Inside, a single document, Permafrost Penitentiary 2, now operational. Your expertise is required. Reporting date, November 15th. I incinerated the letter, but I know they'll send another and another, until I am forced to choose between my family's safety and returning to that frozen hell where nightmares, where human faces and ancient hungers lie in wait in the dark below. Some prisons are built to contain criminals. Others are meant to contain things that should never have been. And someone has to stand guard, no matter the personal cost. The cycle begins anew.